Make it count, play it straight, don't look back, don't hesitate, when you go big time, are the familiar starting lyrics to many people who grew up in the 2010s, and it's from a classic show they will also remember on Nickelodeon, which is clearly Big Time Rush. In this video I'll be having a massive retrospective on the show, its movie in between the show, along with my own summary and thoughts on each episode and the movie, while I also have a look back into the band themselves in real life. Well, let's just get started with actually getting to know who this band is first. As just briefly mentioned, Big Time Rush is a pop boy band who were formed in 2009 along with their TV show. The group consists of Kendall Schmidt, James Maslow, Logan Henderson and Carlos PenaVega, who signed with Nick Records and would eventually be transferred to Columbia Records. The first promotional single would be then titled Big Time Rush, which would serve as the show's theme tune along with being established in the pilot episodes. Overall, they have released 4 studio albums, which are BTR from 2010, Elevate from 2011, 24/7 in 2013 and Another Life in 2023, which all very much fit in parts of their careers. For example, BTR shows the very start of the band, after they would sign their deal with Nick, where the company would then partner with both Columbia and Epic Label Group to help them produce their show, specifically its music, which would then form their debut single mentioned before, being released on November 29th, 2009. Other songs would be produced such as City Is Ours, Any Kind of Guy, and even a cover of the girl band's Play song, Famous, which would also feature in episodes of the show's first season. Another song would then be released on iTunes on April 27, 2010 after the end of the first season of the show. This would be halfway there and would end up being in the Billboard Hot 100, overall being at 93rd place from digital sales. The group would then release the song Till I Forget About You on September 21st, 2010 to promote their release of BTR, which would release itself on October 11th. The album would go on to debut 3rd on the Billboard 200, along with selling at 67,000 copies in its first week. It also got to be number 4 on the Internet Album Charts, and even got number 1 on the Soundtracks chart. Even the song Big Night on the album would reach 79 on the Billboard Hot 100, which would be their biggest song yet. The album would be certified gold for reaching over a sale of 500,000 copies in the US. By November 2010, it would be announced a Christmas EP would be released along with a Christmas special for the show, which ended up being titled Holiday Bundle, which included the song Beautiful Christmas and even a cover of Mariah Carey's All I Wanted for Christmas. Moving on to the new year, on February 15, 2011, they released their 3rd official single titled Boyfriend, which would be released 72nd on the Billboard 100, becoming the band's latest most successful song. It would even get to number 30 on the Billboard Pop Songs chart and blew up in other countries. A remix of the song featuring New Boys would then be leaked onto the web, though aside from the bad news, the group would still be nominated for MTV's Breakout Band Award even that year, with them also making multiple appearances at the Kids' Choice Awards and even being nominated for a Premios Oye, which is essentially Mexico's Grammy for Best International English Song of the Year, but unfortunately did lose to Rihanna's Diamonds. Well, that's who the band are, and what they got up to during Season 1's release, so let's actually talk about Season 1. Given this is a sitcom created by Scott Fellows that aired on Nickelodeon, with the first season running from November 28, 2009 to August 20th, 2010. With the main premise following the adventures of 4 hockey players from Minnesota and Hollywood after being selected to form a boy band by a mega music producer Gustavo Rock. For the main cast, we have the main group played by the 4 boys, with even their real names staying here. Overall, Kendall is labelled as the leader, James is labelled as the handsome one, Carlos is labelled as the crazy built loving one, and Logan is labelled as the smart one. Then we have Sierra Bravo playing Katie, who is Kendall's younger sister, and Stephen Kramer playing Gustavo. For the current cast, we have Tanya Chisholm playing Kelly Wainwright, who is Gustavo's assistant. Caitlin Trebler plays Jo Taylor, who is an actress and singer from North Carolina who ends up dating Kendall. Colin Cates plays Jennifer, who is Kendall and Katie's mother, who takes care of all the children in LA. Erin Sanders plays Camille Roberts, who is a dramatic method actress who becomes best friends with Joe and ends up having a thing for Logan a lot in this season. Max Reedy plays Arthur Griffin, who is Gustavo's boss. David Anthony Higgins plays Reginald Bitters, who is a manager for Poundwoods Hotel, where pretty much all the cast stay at. We then have the Jennifers, which consist of 3 actresses well named Jennifer, with Denise Tonzi playing Jennifer 1, Spencer Locke playing Jennifer 2, and Savannah Jade playing Jennifer 3. We have Tucker Albizi as Tyler Duncan, who stars in adverts and just wants to be a regular kid overall. Barnett O'Hara plays Guitar Dude, who doesn't really need an explanation. Darren Norris plays Bubba Bob, who is Poundwood's maintenance worker. Tara Strong plays Miss Collins, who is the kid's teacher. Lorenzo Lamas plays Dr. Hollywood, who is a local doctor. Phil Lamar plays Hawk, who's Gustavo's nemesis and founder of Hawk Records. And Fabio Lazanda plays Well himself, who is a nemesis to Katie and is a pocket grill salesman. For cameos, we have D. Bradley Blake playing the character named Mr. Smitty. Matthew Moy plays Deke the Blogger. Kurt Hansen plays Dak Zeman. Jordan Sparks appears as herself. Chris Masters appears as himself. And Nicole Schwarzinger appears as herself as well. Now let's move on to these episodes and my own thoughts on them. Alright guys, so this is now the segment where basically I kind of go through a summary of each episode in this season and then essentially kind of give my thoughts on it. Because with covering a film, for example, in these videos, it's very much more easier to kind of say what the general plot is, along with some spoilers as we go with a few sentences really. And then given my whole thoughts on the film is very much easy in its review format. While you can completely review a season of a show in one, it very much doesn't go into it along with talking about the show. You could talk about the summary of like Big Time Rush is about this boy band, this, that, and the other, what I covered before. But here I want to really kind of go into what happens in each episode quite quickly while giving my own thoughts on it. I don't think I'm going to rate each episode because I think that's kind of convoluted in my own mindset. But yeah, this is kind of how it is. This will be the first video where I'm kind of doing this, and hopefully I'll carry on doing it in future videos when I'm covering shows. So yeah, let's just get on to it. Sorry for the cut. I started rushing things and yeah, it didn't work out. But it's the 26th of August 2023. You'll see the date in the corner. And yeah, it's kind of in a video format diary. And it's kind of fitting that I'm here in my childhood home right now, because this is where I originally watched the show sometimes. And yeah, the set might change as we go because I do have 4 seasons of a show and a movie in between it to go through. But yeah, this is a very fun video to work on, and this is the first day I'm starting to work on it. So today I watched 7 episodes of season 1, and yeah, let's just start covering them really. I do have my laptop in front of me with like the summary and this, that, and the other, kind of who directed it, written it, the dates, this, that, and the other, because I can't remember exactly everything that will happen in the episode straight away sometimes, but when I get a glimpse of what it is, I'll be able to ramble on and give my thoughts. So yeah, kind of a good reference really. So yeah, let's just start going into the first 2 episodes, which I'll cover in all in one really, because they're both called Big Time Audition Part 1 and Part 2, literally released on the same date, November 28th, 2009, and just goes through the whole same story really, which is about the audition process and how they end up going to LA with Gustavo. So this episode very much goes through introducing the 4 main boys, a little bit of Kendall's mother and sister, and then obviously Gustavo and Kelly. But going with the main band first, the way they portray these 4 is very much straight off the bat shown. Kendall's like the straight man of the group, who Gustavo very much is intrigued by and thinks is very talented, but he just doesn't want a famous lifestyle like the other 3. James very much does want this lifestyle. He's like the typical pretty boy. He can sing and dance, and yeah, just the difference is that Gustavo's not that interested in them. I think overall from watching it so far, I think Gustavo isn't the biggest fan of it because he wants it too much compared to Kendall. Because Kendall literally doesn't believe he's a singer in this episode, and he has to kind of realize he is. Then for Carlos, he's kind of like the rough kind of character. He's not like aggressive or anything, I won't really call him that, but he's definitely the goofier character who will happily wrestle someone. Like literally, there's a scene where they kind of signal him to beat up James. Then when James gets over exaggerated about possibly being famous and it doesn't really work out initially, he then beats up Carlos. It's kind of funny. Um, and then we have Logan, who very much is the smart guy of the group. Say in these 2 episodes, they do a good job of portraying this, but I will say 3 of them all get better instances of scenes showing this than the other. And I'd say the one that doesn't really get that opportunity is Carlos. There is the scene that I just mentioned along with others, but I feel the other 3 guys very much have scenes where they really say to your face in a way, yeah, you're the smart one, you're the pretty boy, oh, you're special, but you don't realize it. While Carlos doesn't really get that moment, I really hope he does further on watching the show, because I don't remember an entire lot, to be honest. I kind of remember the movie a little bit. I more remember their songs as about now, but it's really fun revisiting the show so far. But yeah, that's very much who the boys are. Gustavo is this big producer who used to, well, be in a boy band himself, I think, and then made very much more with his record company, but he's kind of put himself in the position where he's kind of like a Simon Cowell type. Sorry, a Simon Cowell type, and is very much harsh to people, but at the same time hasn't made anything exactly great for like the past 5 to 10 years, really. And yeah, that's really a good way to summarize him. And he's a very goofy character as well. But I suppose all the characters have their goofy moments. But Kelly very much is the straight woman in this duo. Really, she is his assistant, and she very much makes sure they tell him what to do and agrees with the boys most of the time. But then Gustavo says, no, I'm doing it this way because I'm this aggressive type. But then he does just literally repeat what Kelly says. It's kind of that dynamic. And then with Kendall's mother and his sister Katie, the mother's kind of there to just be the typical mother character, to be like, hey, these boys do have a parental figure here, don't worry. But I do think she does have a moments further on, especially with the episode I'll further talk about in a bit. But Katie very much is the typical little sister who kind of in a way reminds me of Megan from Drake and Josh, but more in the instance of, yeah, she's more like an adult in a kid's body, but she very much still needs her family to be around. She still very much needs the boys to be around. And yeah, it's quite entertaining to watch. But nevertheless, let's go into the main premise of this rather than just talking about how they introduce them. Um, Essentially, the 4 boys are just typical teenagers, really. And you get the whole summary of James really wants to be a celebrity. And eventually, while they're watching TV, um, they get on their headline that, oh, this big producer is now looking for people. He's went to your local town, and yeah, this is the last opportunity of you possibly getting to be famous with this guy. And basically, they all ring their mums at the same time, don't get an answer, then convince this old lady to get them there. And yeah, James is very much nervous about auditioning. Although the boys get given numbers because Kelly's really desperate to find people because Gustavo's being that aggressive towards people auditioning, and is very harsh. And you very much get the example of that of an old classmate that you'll see in the episode quickly. Logan and Carlos get shouted at because basically James is that nervous that he keeps switching his number every time. But when it comes to Kendall, Kendall stops him and kind of beats the straight guy and tells him, this is your dream, you should go for it instead of keep trying to hide from it. And yeah, Gustavo's very harsh towards James because, as mentioned, I think the reason why he doesn't like him is because he is good, but he's just a bit too forward about it. And yeah, eventually Kendall kind of sticks up for his friend and kind of tells Gustavo where to put it, and a fight ensues. Uh, the mother kind of shrugs it off. And yeah, eventually Gustavo and Kelly then turn up to Kendall's house, talks to the boys, but he very much wants Kendall. He's like, I want you to be the star. I want to take you down 3 months with your mother and sister, and yeah, make you into a celebrity possibly. And he doesn't want this at all, but the other 3 boys eventually convince him, but in his manner and kind of the way he inspires the group and they all make a plan with Logan being the main brains, is that basically Kendall kind of says, yeah, I'll go with you if you bring my friends and kind of make them a group with me. Gustavo is that desperate that he goes with it. He kind of tempers up and says, no, 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 no. But eventually the boys go to LA with Kendall's mother and again sister, and it's very much very cool. Then going into episode 2 is where we kind of explore the situation with Gustavo, the kind of whole stance of why Gustavo was looking for people. So very much Gustavo has this boss. I can't remember his name top of my head, but his boss is the typical guy like Gustavo, to be honest, but kind of with the fancy suits and that, where basically he'll say he wants something, but when he doesn't get it and it still works, he acts like he made up the idea. Kind of betraying that thing of producers in Hollywood, kind of just being like aggressive, but then if it works out, they'll act like they were never aggressive about it. It's the way I kind of see it, really. But yeah, Gustavo gets told, what, you got 4 boys to come down here? No, I only wanted 1. Boy bands aren't a thing anymore, this, that, and the other. And basically, Gustavo then has 3 days instead of 3 months to try and convince them that this boy band will work. And basically, the way they bring the 4 boys into this is that 4 boys very much are cocky. They don't really follow what Gustavo's saying. Kendall, who's the one that really has this like talent to him compared to the other 3, very much doesn't want it as well, which frustrates Gustavo. And to be fair, I can understand from both sides in this, really. But eventually it does end with the boys kind of after being told, nah, it's not going to work out, they do kind of get the courage to be like, no, we'll do what you say, we'll train properly, but we want this, instead of being like the typical boy band, we want this to be our way, be Big Time Rush, kind of betraying our main first song, debut single, that we are just these boys who have got an opportunity here. It's kind of a sweet story, really. It also very much, as mentioned in the video before, establishes their main first song themselves in real life, Big Time Rush, and it's very cool, to be honest. I like the way they incorporate the songs into the show so far as well. But yeah, that's going through the first 2 episodes. Pretty good overall. It's a really great introduction. I'd say something that was always liked about the show is the way they portrayed their outfits when they were back in their hometown, because it is quite darker in a way compared to their final outfits when they're in LA. I kind of find that kind of cool. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the first 2 episodes. Moving on to episode 2, which is Big Time School of Rock. This was very interesting episode to me, and it has some very weird cameos as well, which I'll go into. But I did like this, but I do think it was very goofy in a way, but at the same time really works for the show because it is a Nickelodeon show after all. So essentially the boys then discover that without reading the formal contracts that they do still have to go to school while being a boy band. And basically they think they have this opportunity because they get a good glimpse of the school that's in the hotel that they're staying at. And think, oh, this is amazing, but Gustavo wants to kind of hire a teacher and be in the studio all day teaching, and then straight away at like 12:30 he'll have them start training again in these 3 months. And the boys really don't like this. They don't want to be in the studio all day. They want to be with other kids, this, that, and the other. And plus they think from the perspective they quickly had that this school is very much different. And it's a very sweet one, and as well it's very funny because they eventually be like, alright, well, if he wants to run the school this way with this booklet, we'll use the rules about how the school's supposed to be run as a whole. Gotta convince him to actually let us be taught here. And even then, they eventually get what they wanted, but then it's still a typical school at the end of the day. The little perspective they had wasn't really real, and they were just fantasizing over nothing, which was really funny. And they also have a subplot here with Kendall's mum and Katie, where essentially she wants to study at the school as well, but basically the hotel manager's like, no, you have to have some qualification. This has to be like a child actor, singer, whatever, and needs a manager. So basically it's like this whole subplot where she needs to at least be in like 1 commercial, and then she can start studying there, which is quite entertaining. And I quite like the ending of that as well, where eventually they're at this audition and she's with this boy and the mother, and they start arguing, she starts fighting this kid, and they think, oh, you screwed it. But then the overall advertisement was literally about how two kids fight in the mud all day, so she ended up being hired, which was kind of funny as well. But yeah, entertaining episode, again a bit goofy. But to go into these cameos, it's very weird. So the main two ones is like the first two teachers we see. The one that's teaching in school is played by Tara Strong, which I found really cool. And then D. Bradley Baker as well plays like the first teacher, which is Smitty, I think it is, where basically he used to be in a boy band. It didn't work out, so now he's very much resenting this against the boys. But eventually they convince him to be like a solo act, get an audition to be in like more mature bands. Because that's the whole thing, they kind of get away these three different teachers. But as well, the third teacher they have is played by a WWE star, and I found that absolutely weird. The fact is, this was, I searched on Google if this was a real WWE celebrity. It is. But even then, I thought he looked very different in the episode. I didn't even have to search, is this actually just them saying it is a WWE actor and hiring someone else? But it was him, which was very weird. But yeah, overall, Big Time School of Rock was a very entertaining episode. Overcut, kind of stuttered a bit there. Moving on to episode 4 is Big Time Crib, which was a very, again, over-the-top one, but I very much enjoyed, and it's kind of the ones I kind of prefer here because they kind of do like a heist kind of parody with this, and they also introduce like a little gag that actually appeared again in one of these other 7 episodes I've watched today, which I found pretty funny. So essentially, boys have to do this video for Gustavo's boss, where they go onto this set with all these gadgets and they're standing near an apartment and kind of say how they love this, like a promotional video really. And essentially, as well as that, it's quite the opposite of what they actually have at the hotel. Don't get them wrong, they really love the hotel with like the school they have, the pool, this, that and the other, but sometimes the pool's closed down. We get introduced to the character who's kind of like the lobby man, the owner of the hotel, who doesn't like the teenagers hanging around after like 9 p.m, for example, when these boys really get off work most of the time. And it kind of sucks for them because their specific room isn't good enough at all, because to the manager, all they are is just hockey boys at the minute, and he doesn't want them to stay in like a more of a luxurious room. So essentially they kind of have a plan to kind of move the kind of set to be built in their apartment, hide it from the boss and this, that and the other, and it involves like all the other kid actors that they've kind of introduced in the second episode, which is really cool, to be honest. And yeah, it was really entertaining, and to be fair, there's nothing else to really say about it other than obviously the other thing that I briefly just mentioned, which was the I can't remember what he calls them, but basically there's like a whole thing where James really likes wearing bandanas in this episode, and eventually he goes by the stigma of like a bandana type of superhero thing, and it was quite entertaining, to be honest. So next we're going to move on to episode 5, which is an episode I actually really remember growing up, and I still really like it, to be honest, and it's Big Time Bad Boy. So essentially, Gustavo's boss wants them, and to be fair, Gustavo actually agrees with him in this instance, where basically they need a bad boy in the boy band, and they show like all these different examples with like the guy with like his back turned to the other part of the groups, and basically all the guys, especially Kendall, are initially like, we don't really want this in our band. But then Gustavo turns around with Kelly and kind of says, yeah, but the bad boy makes more money, he's like the more popular one. So all the other 3 boys, apart from Kendall, then get convinced, but they don't really work out to be bad boys. And Gustavo, again, really wants Kendall to be in this role. And eventually, Kendall's just like, no. But eventually, Gustavo's boss actually hires this kid named Wayne, who goes by the name Wayne, something like that. Wayne, something on them lines. Which is basically like this ultra tough guy, kind of like an Eminem parody, kind of. And essentially he's like, yeah, I'll just make this random guy join the group. And very much it reflects kind of real life to me, in a way. Like, for example, in real life, some boy bands just form completely random people, including Big Time Rush themselves. They didn't really know each other before doing this show and actually being a band with each other. And to kind of just put in the perspective in this episode of these 4 guys who know each other, and then this random guy's going to join and going to be a dick to them, It kind of seems like something a studio would actually do in real life to just get a few more record sales. And yeah, it's kind of entertaining in a way. But then moving on, the boys eventually find out that this guy is actually an actor from this actress that works, is in the hotel with them, one of the fellow like child stars. And essentially she's like, oh yeah, he's called Wayne. He used to work as like a dork in this certain like show. Would show them, and then like, all right, we're going to tell Gustavo, and this guy's like, so what if I'm a thrower? I've got a contract with this guy. I can join any boy band I want to. So it doesn't really matter if I'm a fake or not. As long as he's playing his character, he's fine. Um, which then hatches the plan of them actually making Kendall pretend to be a bad boy. This was a hidden plan with Gustavo. The only reason why Kelly wasn't involved because there was a little gag in it where she's a bit of a bad actor, so they didn't really want to include her in the plan and ruin it. And yeah, eventually the guy's just like, yeah, I'll just move you into a different band. And it's got like a bad boy off initially. But eventually, when Kendall kind of proves himself to be more of the bad boy, yeah, he turns around to go, we'll put you in a different band. And basically, to try and prove that he's this old tough guy because he really wants to be in Big Time Rush for some reason, he then kicks the guy in the balls, and the guy then puts them in a really embarrassing band. This overall was a very entertaining episode again, and it was the one, as mentioned, which I remember a lot growing up, so it was kind of nice to see this one again. Now moving on to episode 6 is Big Time Love Song, which is quite an interesting one. So I forgot to mention just then that the actress girl that I mentioned in the previous episode, I think she does eventually end up dating Logan, because as well here very much in this episode she very much shows she has a crush on Logan. And yeah, this one is essentially the introduction of a character, Joe, who I definitely know ends up dating Kendall further on in the show. But here she moves into the hotel. All the boys have a massive crush on her. The reason why James doesn't get to be his usual self of charming the women is because he kind of gets an allergy from a spray that he started spraying himself on, which results in a very embarrassing thing later on in the episode. But the other three boys very much, two of them, Logan and Carlos, very much want to do like a persona thing with her, while Kendall wants to go with the approach of, hey, this is just me. But basically just end up all embarrassing themselves in front of her. And while that, Gustavo is writing a love song, and specifically a slow love song, and it's not really working out. And yeah, with that, Katie actually for once joins the main cast and has like a team up thing with Gustavo where she's writing a paper on him. And I can't really further say anything about the storyline. It was kind of sweet, and that was it. But kind of going into the song, eventually Logan, Carlos, and Kendall all start singing the song to Joe, and she then lies and says that she has a boyfriend. And yeah, it's kind of interesting overall. But this is this is the introduction to the song featured in the episode, and it's kind of embarrassing. Sorry, it's Any Kind of Guy. Don't know why I almost forgot it there. Yeah, as well as that, they kind of make like a fake music video for it as well, which I kind of find it very interesting because the music video that's actually in the released officially is very much more kind of stylistic thing to it. But yeah, this was a very good introduction to Joe's character, introduction to one of their songs, which is great. I love the way they implement the songs into this show, and yeah, good episode overall. And finally, we're gonna, for now in this recording, we're gonna move on to episode 7, which is Big Time Mention, and honestly, slightly more of the worst batch so far. But this is the one that actually involves Kendall's mum in kind of a better role here, to be honest with me as well. So it's kind of interesting in a sense. So essentially, Gustavo's looking for someone to mansion City's house while he goes and looks for another band with Kelly, which I'll get into a bit. And essentially, he doesn't. He tells Kelly for some reason what he'll do himself, and then Kelly kind of uses that against him. Is like, well, you've got to find someone to look after your mansion for like a day. And she's like, well, why don't you not do it with the boys? Kind of thank the boys for what they've done so far because you haven't really done so yet. And eventually, Gustavo does so. And it's very interesting because the boys have like 4 ground rules that they should follow, and they all break it, and it all goes wrong. The place ends up being absolutely wrecked. While that, Gustavo and Kelly find these three guys in this band who can definitely sing very well on a professional level, and very much respect what Gustavo has to say, and he likes it initially. But the more the episode goes, he's like, this is too obedient for me. I'd rather have people kind of fight back at me on my opinion. But he won't properly vocally say it. And yeah, he eventually lets other people sign these guys instead of him, which I found really sweet in the episode. And eventually he does thank the guys after the sit-in, and it's kind of sweet overall. And to just move on to the thing with Kendall's mum, the role that she plays here is very much more of a bigger one. So essentially, she doesn't want Kendall to grow up. She very much feels like she has no one else to raise because, again, Katie very much is a character where she's very much more independent. So Katie, in a nice way, pretends that she's ill and eventually reveals it to her because it ends up becoming a bit too much motherly love. But eventually Kendall does ring her, does need help, and she helps him. And I found for once that gave her a proper role, to be fair, in these episodes. And now actually thinking of it, I can't remember which episode it is, so it'll be on the thing. But there's also a subplot in one of these episodes where basically she also has like it's more Katie's subplot, but basically they introduce this character that will be used further on, because I definitely remember him being further used. And he's played by he was the janitor from Ned's Declassified, I'm pretty sure as well. And basically Kendall's mum kind of thinks that he's a serial killer and this, that, and the other. And the whole thing with this is that she's supposed to try and tell her daughter not to judge with this kind of like creepy girl that she's trying to make her hang around with. And yeah, I found that quite funny. And overall, it ended up with Katie being right, Kendall's mum being wrong, which I found pretty cool. But yeah, that's my thoughts on these 7 episodes so far. Overall, pretty solid revisiting this show. And yeah, literally, now you'll see future me discuss more episodes. Alright, so this is the second video entry for this segment of the video. Yeah, you might have noticed a big change already, and that's because it's been a few days since the last watch. It is the 31st of August, the last day of August. And yeah, I've had work for like the last few days, and even then, I've only ended up watching one episode, which is episode 8 at the minute. Just because I had a haircut, and then I've been busy with doing a few other things today. So yeah, the episode I did watch was Big Time Photo Shoot, which is from February 2010, and yeah, I would say this is quite a big step up compared to other episodes, to be fair. I wouldn't really call it like any better, it's very much on the same quality than other episodes, but here they have like 3 storylines which all work quite well with each other. Apart from one actually, which I'll actually mention last. So the main part is obviously the photo shoot with the boys. Essentially they more spend time with Gustavo's boss here, where basically Gustavo's boss really wants to do like an ugly picture, which he obviously thinks is better, but really isn't. And then the boys try and kind of distract them to make their own photo to send to the company, for the magazine, sorry. Yeah, the photos magazine company. The work plan eventually does work with Gustavo and Kelly coming back, but I really want to get into their storyline last. And yeah, overall, this is very fun. It also very much lines with the other storyline I'll get onto in a minute, which is about Katie and Kendall's mother. And essentially, yeah, they keep having this running gag of where, because the band isn't that well known yet, that basically this Dak Zevon guy, which is basically like a Zac Efron type of parody, where he even has like a zombie werewolf type of High School Musical film. Basically he's recording the song in the studio as well, and these fangirls keep hitting the boys because they keep thinking it is well Dak, which is quite funny. And then moving on to that storyline, essentially Katie is a fan of Dak. This is where we actually get to see that she is kind of a young teenage girl for once, and even she references that in the episode too. And more it becomes a storyline where it's not about Katie eventually wanting to get the autograph or photo or whatever. It's more about the mum trying to be determined to get it for her. And you very much see that where eventually Katie saves Dak from these fangirls and her own mum. And yeah, it all very much again ties in very well with literally the story the whole time being told by the boys at the pool after all this, where Eventually, they're all battered up because, well, Dak ends up being in the room than the boys because of Katie, because Vince and stuff like that. And yeah, the boys then get absolutely battered from the amount of fans that come in to try and get Dak. Um, the final storyline I want to kind of go into in this one is Gustavo and Kelly's. This is where they kind of put them away from the boys, and it doesn't really work here. It's very short. It's kind of pointless, to be honest. I think it was more so they could have Gustavo's boss be with the boys for once. And yeah, weirdly enough, they vandalize Matthew McConaughey's mailbox and then end up doing community service. And basically, they get told they have to do the community service by the police right before the photo shoot. And basically, eventually, they get out. I can't even remember now how they get out, and it's very ridiculous. Where it's like, why don't the police not just come back to them? But yeah, that's a part that I didn't really like, and it was very much a way to get Gustavo's boss to be with the boys in the episode, very much to me. But overall, again, I very much like how they've handled having three storylines here, even though one of them didn't work out completely well. And as well as that, it was still just as entertaining as the other 7 episodes. So yeah, that was a summary on Big Time Rush's episode, Big Time Photo Shoot, which is Season 1, Episode 8. So yeah, literally in a second you'll see me again talking about how many other episodes I watched. Alright, so this is the third and, yes, a final segment for the Season 1 episode reviews and recaps. Yeah, I ended up watching the remaining, I think, 11 episodes in the span of 2 days. One reason why it isn't split up into 2 where I'm talking about it the day before is because essentially I had like a family event on at the night, and basically for the daytime I just decided to work on stuff while watching episodes in the background. And then today I ended up just watching the remaining few episodes I had left. So yeah, as well as that, didn't record that straight away as well because there was stuff going on around the house as well. Yeah, it's been quite a busy night and day really. So yeah, let's just get cracking into sorry about the cut there. So yes, let's just get cracking into, well, the recaps and the quick reviews on the remaining 11 episodes. So first we have Big Time Break, which I very much really like the concept of, to be honest. And overall, it is still just a decent Big Time Rush episode, where basically they actually for once split all the boys up and have their individual stories, which for the most part actually worked out really well. Some were shorter than others, but overall they were all pretty entertaining, with one of them of course being the most important to me. So the first one I can think of top of my head is, for like a quick one, is Logan. Essentially he wants to kind of be included in this seminar type of thing, this class voluntary thing. I don't really know how to pronounce it. I don't think these types of classes with people promoting books are too much of a thing in the UK. But essentially, he then finds out that this woman only teaches to girls, which then makes him basically pretend to be a girl to get in there with the help of Kendall and Kate's mother. Which, honestly, fair enough. It is a trope that happens in these types of shows, and I would like to think it kind of stops around about this time. And you know what? It's fine, to be honest. Nothing really else to be said, other than just the end result is basically that this woman is quite sexist, and yeah, ends up with basically Logan just being like, yeah, I'm a guy and I understood your book, and then basically got beaten up, and then basically it's the end of that story. It's a very weird and complicated one, but overall fair enough for a 2010 episode of Nickelodeon. The next one I very much found kind of funny because it kind of also explores a little bit more into his character, is Carlos's. Basically, his helmet goes missing and he just goes absolutely mental and starts like ratcheting through the apartment, to where eventually his dad ends up coming from, I hope not from all the way back from where they're from. And yeah, basically we find out he's a cop, and essentially he is basically just Carlos, but with a lot of the lovable part cut off. He's still a very nice man, when it comes to investigating, he very much is the bad cop, and they even reference this with good cop, bad cop in one of the scenes. And yeah, it was very fun to explore his dad a bit and actually see other family member that isn't like Kendall and Kate's mum. Um, and yeah, overall, it's kind of like a mystery thing where basically they look over CCTV, they keep asking these people, "Hey, did you steal it?" And they're like, "No, but something else is stolen from me," and this, that, and the other. And then eventually, the last person that they forgot about was I don't think I've mentioned a character at all in the video, to be honest. But there's essentially, out of like all the other people that are in the hotel, there's this actor dog, and basically it was them, which is kind of goofy and again fair enough for a 2010s Nickelodeon show. But overall, it was very nice to actually get a bit more into depth with Carlos and his family a little. Um, James is one. I think is yeah, it was him trying to get an acting job, and no, this one was his modeling job. I'm getting mixed up, I think. No, this is the acting one. There's 2 episodes, and I'm gonna go into the other one. I think the other one's the job one, but essentially there's 2 episodes in the same season where James wants a acting job and a modeling job, but this one definitely now thinking it's the modeling job. No, the acting job. God. But yeah, essentially James wants to become an actor, and with like 2010s parodies, he very much just thinks being an actor is just being handsome, and that is it. And Camille kind of helps him to kind of show him that's not what acting's about, and very much she goes over the top and very much too much into her characters where she blows it. But then the whole twist is that he actually does get the job from just being handsome for the camera, and yeah, he just turns down the role nicely because Camille gets heartbroken that she didn't get casted, which is overall a sweet story and kind of truthful for the 2010s. I'd still say a lot of films do that now, where I wouldn't call it's because they're handsome and this, that, and the other, but a lot of movies still like to hire people just because they're famous, and sometimes they just don't fit their roles. So yeah, very fan story. But the most important one for at least Big Time Rush, I wouldn't call it a big, massive, oh, this is groundbreaking, because it's absolutely not, is Kendall's storyline, where basically we re-explore the whole thing with Joe, where we know that she's lying about having a boyfriend, but obviously everyone else doesn't. And basically, Kendall just wants to hang around with Joe while still trying to pursue on her, which is kind of weird, to be honest. A lot of problematic things in this, but I'm going to allow it since it's a 2010s Nickelodeon episode. And then basically she won't have it, but they're just hanging out in general. Then Joe is basically on the phone and is like to her mum and being like, "Well, yeah, this is a cute guy and stuff, but I need to focus on my career." And then coincidentally, Kate is literally sat next to her reading the magazine established in one of the previous episodes, and then tells Kendall, and then basically they argue and then get together. That's basically the whole thing. And yeah, fair enough, big trope in these types of things. This is a very tropey type of episode to me, definitely. But I'm just going to allow it because it's a silly 2010s Nickelodeon show, as I've said like three to 4 times now. But yeah, the next episode is Big Time Demos, which kind of is in the name, really. Essentially, the boys have their demo made, and they kind of thought in the perspective of, oh, when the demo's ready, we'll definitely get picked up. But Gustavo's like, no, we're barely even halfway there for you to be a proper band yet. We kind of need, like, we kind of actually need to get approved and actually get through to actually start producing a proper CD and then tour and this, that, and the other. And essentially, the boys start panicking. Gustavo starts, everyone starts panicking. Especially when Gustavo's boss's daughter walks through the door and kind of lies and says that she is the person that's going to be listening to these demos and tells her dad which one should be chosen. And overall, this then ends up with her being a typical selfish rich girl type of thing, and keeps wanting one of the members to be her boyfriend. And this also has a running thing where James is getting very like angry because he's not being chosen to be one of the boyfriends. I'm just gonna say now, she just twists it and says she doesn't want to take into a pretty for her, which fair enough. And yeah, eventually she bursts down crying because Kendall, being who Kendall is, very realistic and true, kind of tells her, you know what, we're done with this. We're not gonna please you just to be like proof with this demo. And she breaks down and eventually tells them the truth that she is just lying. And this is where it just gets very weird and very sitcom-y. And then we then find out the real person who's going to be listening to the demos and approves it by just clapping is a monkey. And they try and convince the monkey to like their music. And yeah, it's just very weird. And then eventually the daughter just sticks up for herself to her dad and says, no, the monkey's wrong. Big Time Rush appeals to teenagers, this, that, and the other. And he has her happy ending. This is a weird episode to me because I get it. You want to be funny, teen show, haha, monkey. But the start of this episode was very strong, and I get it. They wanted to have a twist and this, that, and the other, and a weird little story for this daughter. But they could have just said it was a very hard push-in producer guy or something like that, and then just kind of say, no, the teenage girl knows a lot more about what teenagers is like, rather than a middle-aged man who wants to hire such said vampire band, which they also mention a few times in the episode. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of that one, but fair enough. I'm just like to say that with this whole show, I predict is that I'm just going to think all these episodes are pretty alright, but I obviously will just have a bit more problems with others. Moving on to the next episode is Big Time Party, which is the typical party episode, let's just say. Not very good track record, last two. Basically, the boys have 2 out of 3 strikes before they get evicted, really. But they want to throw a party because Gustavo's throwing his own for them being approved for full-on album now, but won't include the boys because he thinks they will be too childish and make the party too childish and ruin the sophistication. And now they want to do a social gathering in the apartment, so they technically don't get kicked out. And essentially, Carlos then accidentally sends a text message to all his contacts, inviting way too many people. And let's just say it's a Project X, but it's just a typical big apartment house party, really. And along with that, I just want to add the comment of they kind of do the typical thing of let's replace alcohol and other substances and just do crisps and pop, which obviously is soda and chips, which I just find very, very charming. It's just a thing you have to know at the sitcoms, really. And basically, along with that, this then ends up with this whole scenario where basically Kendall and Joe don't really have anything too much in common and with their interests, really, but they kind of bond trying to distract Bitters, using like a Ghostbusters type of outfit, trying to bust the party. And yeah, they distract him and then end up trapping him in this box that is established like at the start of the episode, which is quite good, to be honest. Along with that, we also have like a plot with Logan and Camille where, to be fair, he's trying to hang around with her, but then also the rich girl then ended up saying at the end of the her episode last time, but basically she was still technically going out with Logan, and I'm kind of impressed that they stuck with that. And they kind of made an episode where basically has to be in between that and gets caught out, and yeah, fair enough. Again, very typical of sitcom. I feel like I'm going to keep saying this throughout this whole video, but I do like the show, don't get me wrong. And then along with all this, Gustavo's side of it is that basically his party ends up being very boring. Even his boss and their higher up are getting very bored, and essentially he needs the boys, but then finds that they have their own party, and then they all start hanging around at their party, which ends up being around the pool, which, yeah, happy ending. To be fair, I made fun of it initially there, but with it being a typical party episode in a sitcom, but at the same time, they really tie all these plot lines with each other really well, and even handle like a thing where it's like, oh, you can have a relationship where you don't have like every same interest, and you can kind of bond doing different type of activities, even if it means make this poor man try to do his job and trap him into a box so we can have a party. But yeah, the next episode is Big Time Jobs, which is the one I kept kind of getting mixed up with the whole acting thing with James. Essentially, this episode once again splits the boys up, essentially, apart from two of them. Because essentially, Gustavo's really angry because his boss is on his back by how much they're wrecking stuff and how much money that is ultimately costing them. And essentially, he makes them do different jobs. I'm just going to get James out the way straight away since I've already kind of mentioned it. But essentially, he wants to do modeling and gets Katie to help him with it all. And essentially, she can't find any job for him because she's a kid trying to do this. But I suppose later on, they kind of show that she's a kid that can still do quite big jobs, essentially. And but here she can't really find anywhere, but from the help of like a weird character, which is essentially like Gustavo's kind of like big tough like bodyguard kind of, essentially gets him a modeling gig with a company that they've kind of established that James really loves. But ultimately it's an elbow ad for like a cream for elderly, and it's more of a company that they kind of own, and it's not the main one that James uses. And he's ultimately disappointed at first, but ends up doing the gig because, hey, it's modeling work and it's money. And then moving on to Carlos, basically he is being Gustavo's assistant now, even though he already has one, so fair enough. Essentially, he's been quite annoying, and Gustavo tells him to get him a coffee, which he ultimately likes, from this prototype machine that is in the kitchen, but at the same time, it won't stop foaming after making the initial cup of coffee, and Carlos tries everything to turn it off and it will not work, and eventually Kelly helps him out, where in this room filled with foam, they ultimately wreck the machine. And fair enough, because this is the one where I think ultimately it works out the most well. Yes, it caused mess, but I'd say out the 3 jobs we're going to go through, this is the one where I'm like, fair enough, he didn't actually do anything out the boat and it wasn't his fault. And then finally we have Kendall and Logan's, where essentially they're kind of trying to be sign guys for like a car wash. They get fired because it's too hard of a job, really, but it does pay a lot to them. According to $20 per hour. And they then try and run a babysitting business, which I also find out is very hard, but then decide to combine both the jobs they have had in this episode and make kids wash cars. Yay, child labour, very problematic. I can't even defend this one for being a typical 2010 Nickelodeon show. I'm sure others have done it, but it's very, very out of pocket. And essentially they get all the money they need for Gustavo. He's happy, but then everything goes wrong for all 4 boys as usual. And essentially, for James's side, he had a makeup team and an outfit team, even though it was ultimately just a elbow commercial at the end of the day, because Katie kind of forgot to pay them and they want their money. And then essentially for Carlos, someone that represents the company that provided the machine said, hey, we had an agreement and you have wrecked our prototype, so you have to pay a fine. Bitters comes in and kind of says about Kendall and Logan being like, you owe me money because you made a unofficial babysitting business in my hotel. And Gustavo owes a lot more money, around I think 14,000 here, and basically wrecks a window, wrecks a vase, a lot of things, and his boss walks in and blames everything on him. And that's kind of it, really. Gustavo is in the shit once again. Let's just move on to the next episode, which is Big Time Blogger, which is kind of a weird one to me. This is where they're trying to go into the internet stuff, but I think they handle it pretty well overall, especially for a 2010s thing. Initially, they get vlogging cameras, which doesn't work out before the theme song, where they end up wrecking them all. And then essentially, even though it's an outdated thing, but it very much represents a part of the internet, and still technically, blogging does exist in a way with just big articles written by people who get hired to write such said articles. Basically, this guy called Deke, who runs a website called Day with Geek. Sorry, Deke. I was meant to say Deke there, but I said Geek. That was a mistake. Please don't write a bad blog about me. But yeah, essentially, he then basically the boys went through this whole thing where they had to train to do different answers, posture, outfits to please him, but he sees through it completely and is like, yeah, I'm just gonna write an article about how you guys are phonies. I only need 5 minutes for this. They eventually end up locking him in the cupboard, trying to convince him to have another thing, and it ends up with them chasing him and this, that, and the other. And yeah, eventually he does write a good article about them after saying, yeah, initially this was a very bad thing, but ultimately he kind of had fun in the hotel, and even then they kind of did actually provide him with sparkling water in the middle of all this. And yeah, it was kind of a cute thing really, because their boys thought they really failed, but ultimately it ended just creating a kind of fun little thing where Deke got to have some fun and kind of hid it from the boys in the end. The other side of it is basically Gustavo getting cancelled in 2010 of all years. Essentially, he tries and runs like multiple accounts, like alt ones for the boys and one for himself. And basically, he tries to like write "I hate Brussels sprouts," but then he doesn't have a clue how he's handling this phone, and then there's a like tweeting. I can't remember what the parody was of it, and he ends up tweeting "I hate Brussels," which kind of implements the Belgium capital. And essentially, I hate this, and then start making like kind of protest against him and Big Time Rush, being like, "We hate Gustavo, this, that, and the other." And eventually, Gustavo tries to please them instead of just coming out and saying it was a typo, which, to be fair, I don't think they would believe. But basically, he then ends up having his PR team then publish a photo with waffles, but then they're more Americanized and they see through this. And then basically that kind of ends the way it is, and cancel culture is cancel culture. But luckily they only got cancelled in Belgium. So fair enough, their Belgium sales are down, but at least they got a good blog at the end of the day. And then we then see them trying to give them the vlog cameras, and they just wreck it again by going down like a quote-unquote slide in the vents, which Deke went through before. Fair enough. Very entertaining episode, and to be fair, most of the internet culture here, they kind of handle well, and they don't make the whole episode be like, look at this website, guys, look at this, that, and the other. They kind of more handle like how people react to the internet, which very much props to them, to be honest. But I suppose this is Nickelodeon, who kind of did a good job with iCarly as well, so props. The next episode is Big Time Terror. Not one I completely like, to be fair, and I think this might just be me trying to be a wannabe person in any kind of place in the film industry. Essentially, the boys kind of think that there's a ghost, and yeah, it more ends up being like a story between Carlos, Logan, and Mr. Bitters of all people. I can't even remember what the others do, to be fair, and kind of looking in front of me right now, there's nothing that really says anything else happens. So yeah, this is more of a Carlos, Logan, and Mr. Bitters story, along with a character we'll establish in a bit. No, I remember the other one now. I remember the other plot. It works out very well. But sorry, but yeah, I'm still not a very big fan of this episode, to be honest. Essentially, they kind of do like a whole thing where they're trying to prove that it isn't a ghost, or it is a ghost with like a webcam. Eventually, they find out. The boys find out without Mr. Bitters noticing, is that this wannabe like filmmaker girl who is just proving that she can do really good ghost effects. I guess that's what the point of it was. I can't remember on top of my head fully. But the other plotline, which they eventually end this off with in a fun, goofy way, is that Gustavo's mansion, I think, had something being built in or something like that. So he had to stay over the apartment for once. And eventually he gets too used to it, and basically they establish that Gustavo had no childhood, so he's trying to live it here. And basically it's Logan and Kendall trying to get rid of him, and they just can't, and eventually they use this girl's VFX to kind of trick him into going back to the mansion and writing their next song. Which, I don't really like this episode at all. I kind of like the Gustavo stuff, the established stuff with him, but the overall thing with the whole horror filmmaking aspect of it, it's just not realistic. But I suppose I'm not a guy who does music and isn't in a pop band or anything. So I suppose people in that industry could point out a lot of things that are wrong with that as well. So I'm just going to move on. I think this is the episode I really like the least, to be honest. But the next one is very much another stereotypical one, which is Big Time Dance, which essentially the boys kind of are in class, find out that they do this like kind of end of term thing, I guess. I can't really remember, where basically the kids all say it's boring and it's just basically bitters pretend to be a clown with balloons, and the boys then should suggest to Tara Strong, the teacher, being like, "Hey, what about if we do a dance, you know?" And then she's like, "Sure, you can be a committee, but you have to run it all by tonight." And essentially, it's about the boys trying to get a venue, this, that, and the other. And yeah, most of it goes right for them, apart from like actually trying to ask people out. Overall, what eventually ends up happening for the venue and this, that, and the other is that they end up running the party, from my own knowledge, completely fine for once. Gustavo's like, yeah, just as long as you actually perform one of your songs there and kind of promote the album a bit to your classmates. And essentially now let's just move on to the boys' love life adventures in this episode. So let's go with Logan and James first, because it's more about Logan's here. He wants to ask Camille out, but basically he's very much too shy to, and as much as they establish, yeah, Logan's been out with girls before, he turns around and says, well, no, most of that came from double dates, all the girls asking him, so he's realistically never asked a girl out. And it then ends up with a lot of awkward stuff here between him and Kamal, and basically James is trying to help Logan out with this, and ends up accidentally asking multiple girls out. Accidentally in middle of this. The whole thing with Logan Camille is very sweet. He gets the help from James and Kendall here, where basically he pretends to be a knight in like an acting type of way for Camille, and they are officially a couple now, like how Kendall and Joe are. So let's just move on to Kendall's here. Yeah, he just doesn't ask Joe out because he's that busy, but then he does just turn around to Joe after she gets a bit angry at him at the dance and just goes, like a typical dude in this type of thing, like, thought I didn't need to ask you because I thought we were going out, and she's very happy with that because this is where they officially label a bit like Camille and Logan, but they're going out. But we kind of knew that from a couple of episodes ago, but I guess just Joe didn't figure that out. Fair enough. And the final one is Carlos trying to be with the Jennifers. This is a thing that keeps recurring through the show, and I really hope to do end it because he literally addresses at the end of the season that he is single and he really needs to get a girlfriend. Basically, the Jennifers are like, oh no, we don't want to go out with you. We want to impress people by having like really international boyfriends, so you got to disguise to be them, and he just completely fails at it. And this girl is just like, the girl from the Terror episode is just like, want to dance with me? And he's like, yeah, I can be my own self and get a girlfriend. Then he doesn't actually get a girlfriend. They kind of forget the whole thing between him and this girl, and even then, this girl doesn't appear for the rest of the season, so fair enough. But overall, this is quite a nice episode. It kind of establishes who's with who, and as well as that, it's quite fun, to be honest, as an episode. The only downside is that the thing I mentioned before with James is that he accidentally asked these girls out, and basically they all then terrorized him for this. And I kind of feel really bad because he was doing a really nice thing for his friend and it just backfired. But yeah, overall, a pretty solid episode. The next one is, sorry for the cutout, I went really, really awkward on camera there, and I don't think you want to see that. Yeah, I'm very, very, very not used to being on camera most of the time now on this channel. The next one is Big Time Sparks, which uses, obviously, Jordan Sparks, who is a singer herself. I'm not going to lie and say I know any of her songs, but she's a singer in real life, essentially, and she must have been semi-popular in 2010 to get an episode with Big Time Rush, and eventually make a song which they kind of they fake all of how this was created in this episode to then promote in real life, which is essentially all the songs in the show. And yeah, basically, It's very dry. I'm gonna get a drink quickly after this, but don't worry, I will carry on. Basically, Jordan Sparks moves in after moving from another record company. Basically, this guy called Hawk, who is Gustavo's kind of rival, basically wants to sign her and brings a skunk into the building and kind of tries and blackmails Gustavo, but they kind of figure it all out, really. Fair enough. But the whole thing with Jordan is that she's really not figuring out this next song she needs to make, while also having a lot of bad luck in the hotel, which the boys think is themselves. And eventually it just ends up with them trying to prove that they aren't bad luck, and then it ends up creating a lot of bad luck for themselves and Jordan, where they all eventually get stuck in a tunnel, with also Joe thinking that Kendall is trying to cheat with Jordan as well. Um, this overall then ends with basically the boys helping Jordan with a song. She's like, "Oh, we could do a duet," and she eventually pitches that to Gustavo. He likes that idea. And then the thing with Joe and Kendall isn't really addressed again, but most of the time it just ends off with her thinking, "Yeah, he was team typing," but again they don't address it. So what does it matter really? I guess it's again just a typical trope in these types of shows. And yeah, the whole thing with Hulk is that basically Jordan tricks him into getting into his limousine by saying, "Oh yeah, I'll sign you, Gustavo was really bad," and they put the skunk inside of his limousine and trick him, and yeah, fair enough. Uh, Overall, I found this quite a funny episode, but again, it very much has a lot of cliches, but I ain't complaining. This is a big time rush episode. Yeah, let's move on to the next one, which is episode 17, Big Time Fever, which I very much like because it very much addresses something that a lot of people still say to this day. I forgot to actually get my drink. I'm going to cut after I get my drink. I forgot about that. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Right, sorry, I'm back from that oak on the stairs. So, yes, Big Time Fever. Essentially, this is where we find out how people ended up being their Hollywood selves, as it kind of is established in the first episode. But as well as that, we see this happening with the boys themselves, apart from Kendall. So essentially, the episode starts with James now having this full tan, essentially, from the company that he really loves. And he's like, "Yeah, I want to have my skin." Go for the cut again. Basically, yeah, he wants his cut. I'm not even going to address this, why that time I cut again. I was just being awkward. His skin is very much orange. He's like, "Yeah, this is the new me, this, that, and the other." And it just very much looks goofy. Gustavo then tells the boys to sort this out. And essentially, Logan then ends up becoming a hippie from the Qatar guy. And Carlos ends up being one of the Jennifers because one of the Jennifers is just absent now. But they're back again. This is another thing they don't establish, which is very weird and a very common thing that kind of ends up happening at the end of this season from the looks of it. Essentially becomes one of the Jennifers and tries to be a main star of Big Time Rush. And yeah, Kendall's the only one that doesn't end up being affected by this. This is essentially labelled as the Hollywood Fever, which is a thing that Camille establishes to them, which happens, for example, Guitar Dude was originally a cello player, but then became a guitar dude, I guess. And eventually they were like, "Oh, so that explains you." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, basically the whole thing is like, they do address how Camille is just over the top sometimes, but then also at times is just very nice and down to earth like the rest of them, uh, which I kind of found funny, to be honest. Um, Basically, Gustavo and Kelly even know about this and says it's a thing that has broke up pretty much all their previous boy bands. And basically, they then kind of turn around to Kendall and go, "How come you aren't like this?" And he's just basically like, and then basically he turns around and says that eventually they kind of figure it out, sorry, but basically he goes skating a lot because he still really has a passion for hockey and wants to remind himself of where they came from. And basically they then realize that because of that ice, because of that ice, he's kind of not getting the fever really. And basically they kind of find out that it's overall just from the heat wave. And I can't even remember how they end this. It's kind of very forgettable, so I'm very sorry. This is very forgettable ending, but overall it does have a realistic trail. So I'm just going to quickly search how it ends so I can tell you. Right, yeah, that's how they end it. They basically tie it in with the plot, the other subplot, which I massively respect, but I'm so sorry. It's bound to be forgetful if I forgot it that badly that I needed to search it up, and I didn't remember it at all until obviously I read it again. So basically, Katie's subplot in this episode is with Mr. Bitters, where basically she's trying to run this snow cone kind of operation because of the heat wave, and basically he is like, no, you're not running this on my property. She technically doesn't run on the property by hovering over, but still she doesn't have permission from this overall, and eventually Mr. Bitters then ends up getting what he wants, but then he gets fined for running a thing that's not being approved by the government, I guess. I don't know the terms for this in America, I'm very sorry. But then eventually the whole thing of how they get the boys back to normal is that they have like a snowball fight technically with the snow cones, which is, yeah, cool way of tying it up. But again, I forgot it that badly that it must be that forgettable. But overall, again, I do like the message that they overall give of like, yes, Hollywood changes people. Fair enough. The next episode is Big Time Video, which is basically this is a one that I remember a lot here because it establishes like a music video I used to watch a lot, and I'm kind of impressed that they kind of actually shown the full music video properly at the end, and it wasn't an alternative one like the previous episodes. So basically, the boys have their first music video to be shot, and essentially they're trying to find directors for this. Gustavo's really not liking some, but at the same time the boys have promised pretty much everyone in Palm Woods that they will be able to cameo in this music video because they're not finding good acting jobs, or they sometimes just accidentally promising it because they think the sad news that the people are going to break to them is that they're moving, which is very much funny. Basically they're trying to get these people to not be approved because they keep pitching the city is ours as a thing where the boys will be alone in the city because it's theirs, and this, that, and the other. And eventually Gustavo's like, no, I'm going to just direct this myself. Everyone's shit. Practically, that is what he says. And, yeah, the boys then try and film their own music video. It is just terrible. That's not going to convince the parents that they can stay. So eventually they then kind of do their typical thing of, hey, let's create a plan, but this time with this, the photo shoot guy, because he's trying to now be a music video guy and Gustavo keeps shutting him down. And yeah, they eventually create the video of The City Is Ours. They show it. It is the music video that I watched when I was younger. I was amazed that they properly established this one. And Gustavo's like, yeah, I'm mad, but it's worked out once again, so fair enough. And yeah, that's kind of what the episode is, and I just really loved how they like established the whole music video so well. So now the final two episodes are all essentially the same plot, very much in a two-parter like the pilot episodes. This is a Big Time Concert Part 1 and Part 2, but obviously I'll just be talking about them completely all in one, and there's a lot to actually discuss here. So if you notice me reading, that is just because there's that much, but overall they do handle this very, very well, and it also covers something quite big, which I addressed before, I think. And it's basically the whole thing where I just don't see why Gustavo doesn't want James. It's just a weird stigma he had against James at the start. And yeah, right, okay, I cut there because I didn't want to waste the time of mentioning most subplots in this episode. They're all very entertaining, and I very much suggest watching these finales if you just want to watch a handpick full of episodes. But I'm just going to mention the main part because there's not a point of mentioning the other plots. Apart from one, which I did kind of bring up before. So essentially, the boys have their first concert, and the whole of Part 1 is kind of setting up this concert. But Griffin, which for once I've realised I've actually just addressed his name properly, Gustavo's boss, cancels the concert because it's too much of a risk now, and he wants to run a business, which is essentially a children's book reading type of thing. And essentially Gustavo is really sick of this, even though after they move the boys back to their hometown, this, that, and the other, they're getting used to being who they are again, apart from James. Basically Gustavo then gets the rights of Big Time Rush back by selling his mansion and this, that, and the other, and wants to convince two companies that Big Time Rush can be sellable and do a good concert. And essentially, meanwhile he does this, basically, as mentioned, Kendall wants to do hockey again, Logan wants to be a doctor again, Carlos wants to be a superhero for some reason, and they even then convince the old lady they will mow the lawn for her because they technically broke a promise that they made in the first episode, which then, let's just get out of the way, results in her mowing the lawn because they end up going back with Gustavo to LA. For James' side, they basically tell James he needs to get realistic. Big Time Rush has failed. His Hollywood dream is broken, even though theirs aren't, which is completely unfair, to be fair. And basically, Hawk, who was established a couple of episodes ago, then signs James to be his own thing because basically his assistant is like, yeah, he's got talent and he'll pretty much do whatever to be big. However, as much as this whole thing with Hawk works out essentially at the start, where he's back in the hotel, he's back in the old room, he gets his own nice design himself, he's got sushi, this, that, and the other, he's got a butler. Basically, James then finds out that basically Hawk wants to change his name to James with a Z, give him like big lips in the poster and the album covers, etc. And even AI, yes, they don't call it AI, but basically want to AI his songs where he doesn't even put any work into it, which overall he doesn't like. And even then, Hawk turns around and goes, well, it will crush the Big Time Rush. And he's like, well, I don't really want to do that, even though I'm not that much of a friends with them anymore by the way they treat me. And basically he then leaves the group, leaves this, even though I'm pretty sure he said he signed a contract, but they never bring this up again. And while he's doing that, the boys initially try and replace James, and then basically try and do a trio thing, which just does not work out at all with it. Yeah, this is going on for a while. This is a very long thing, and I think I mentioned subplots, but whatever. I'm getting through it, guys. I'm getting through it, and I hope you're liking this. And essentially, the boys eventually all get back together. They promote this concert from their friends, this, that, and the other. And basically, Gustavo then gets all these companies, including even Griffin, who's noticed the poster, to come to this concert and hopefully get them signed. However, when they go into what they think is their dressing rooms, they get kidnapped by Hawk and his assistant. But eventually, thanks to the whole Super Carlos subplot, but even though they do it very realistically, he just falls downstairs and it breaks and he ends up being freed. They make it back on concert on time while people are leaving, but luckily get the attention of everyone again. Griffin then kind of goes up to Gustavo and is like, please let me sign you guys back, and basically Gustavo gets what he wants. And yeah, Big Time Rush is back and this, that, and the other, and they're doing really well for themselves again. So yeah, it was a happy ending for season 1 overall. It was a very long episode. I skipped out on all other subplots now, thinking of it. Apart from one that I really want to mention, which I said before, where I said that they kind of show in a previous episode that Katie is very much in an adult manner, but also very much at the same time failed in some aspects, like paying people because she is just a kid. Here, she runs a bootleg t-shirt company. I don't think they actually established. Maybe they might mention it in season 2. I really doubt it, if it ran well or not. But yeah, overall, it seems that she can actually run a company in this episode. So, fair enough. But yeah, that was overall season 1. I really enjoyed season 1. It's very much actually what I remember of the show, and it's very charming, even though I do point out some problems. But of course, this is a Nickelodeon teen show. I'm 21 now. I'm not gonna respect everything they do. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm gonna go into production next in the segment. But before that, to you guys, you're probably thinking I'm working for pizza right now. I just want to establish this as a TMN t-shirt. Got this the other day, right? I'm just gonna flex the back of it, and then once I flex the back of it, it's gonna fade out, and we're gonna go to the production. All right? Hopefully this goes frame. I hope you see that. It's not very awkward, and I hope you can hear me. But yes, now I'm talking, and it's going to fade into production segment, and I hope this isn't cringy. It probably is cringy, and I'm very, very sorry. Alright, so hello. This is very future Sean here. Can't remember when I recorded that segment, but it's been fun editing it so far. However, I'm that far into the future that I am almost done with watching season two. I literally did a log before with episodes. However, I've only just got done editing this part. Unfortunately, I feel like these videos are going to be split with its eras in different videos because I don't think I can really carry on going into the next era of the band and then season two and then the movie, etc. Any really further because it's already an hour and 19. So yeah, this is the first starting of the band and their show with them starting off obviously, and then season one of the show coming out. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in the next part, which will cover obviously the next era, which I will properly go into in that part. And then obviously season two, possibly the movie, depending how long it takes to cover season two, which is the longest. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from then on. But I hope you've enjoyed everything you've seen so far. And yeah, I am gonna do one video in between this and the next Big Time Rush video, which is about a old movie which hasn't got anything to do with BTR, which is Wanted. But if you're interested in that, I hope you go and check it out. In the meantime, if you want to see more Big Time Rush stuff in the future, maybe check out my social medias, which are on the screen right now, to see updates possibly. But as well as that, make sure to subscribe to the channel to really get notified when it does get uploaded, and of course ring that bell thing or whatever. I've not actually done that on the channel before, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and yeah, see you in the next one.